everyone. So today we're going to look at how you are going to start to construct your revealed coil bowl. So for this project, right, we've talked about your bowl shape before. You need to be making sure that your bowl is covered in some sort of way before you start to arrange the clay on the inside. So before you even get into rolling out coils, etc., I would take the time to sort of do this. So you have a couple of different options. We talked before about this, but just to review, you can use newspaper on the inside. If you're using some sort of newspaper, I would tape it down using smaller pieces so that way you don't get any major crinkles on the inside. You also can use one of the garbage bags that came in your kit. That's another option for you. So to do that, you would just stick it into the bag and then sort of press it down before you start to work. I chose to use saran wrap. I think that it sticks well to itself. And I also think for the purposes of this demo, you can see it very well what I'm doing. It's really easy. I only put one piece here and then just another part to sort of patch that other edge. And then it really does just sort of stay in place. So if this is an option for you, I think that's a good route for you to go. So I finished my sketch. This is what I'm going to be working with today just for this example. So it does have some symmetry, but again, just a reminder, if you want to do something asymmetrical, you're going to approach this from the same, just sort of general approach, and we'll talk about that in a second. So once you have this covered, and your bowl and mold is ready and set to go, you can sort of set that aside and start to work on prepping your coils. So looking at the bag of clay that you have in that chunk of clay, if the clay is a little bit stiff, what I would recommend doing is while that clay is still in the bag, actually just sort of hitting it against the ground a couple of times. What that'll do is sort of force the molecules to loosen up a little bit so the clay will be a little bit softer for you to work with. You can see then what I have done is I've used my needle tool to go and slice along that piece of clay to create some smaller chunks. I've then used my hand to sort of break them down to something that is roughly, I would say like a hot dog-ish thickness, maybe a little bit thicker. So from here, you can go and start to roll out your coils. What I would recommend is only rolling out the amount that you plan to use today. So don't roll out all of your clay because you run the risk of things getting a little bit stiffer. And then when you bend those coils, they might get brittle and crack. So I would take just a couple of chunks. This amount is probably good for each day, and then save the rest of that clay in your bag for later. So I'm going to just review basic coil rolling technique here. So once you have your pieces, you want to be working flat. I personally like to stand, and what I use are the finger tips mostly, not the palm of my hand. And I use them and I pull gently outwards in a sort of gentle rolling motion. And this will force the clay. This is going to sort of make the video here jiggle, but that's all right. This will force the clay to move in an outward direction, sort of forcing it to become thinner without stretching it too much. So notice where I'm just using my fingertips. I find that if you use your whole hand, you end up getting some flat areas, and then it's not quite as round. It's a little bit harder to work with. So you want it to be as circular as possible. So you can sort of move from side to side. If it gets a little bit flat, just kind of stand it on its end and just gently continue to roll. You want to end up with a coil that is roughly the thickness of your pinky. So that is your goal here. You don't want it to be too much thicker than that. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of hard to work with and get the detail that you want. But generally, you want the coils that you are using for this whole project to be roughly the same thickness. If, for example, and I'll just show this to you. So this is around a good thickness, right? This is around my pinky. If you have a coil or you are starting to get to points where your coils are very, very thin in one spot, like for example, like that, just break this part off and don't use it. If your coils are this thin, that's a little bit too thin because we're going to be smoothing these coils out to get them to adhere to one another. This is too thin and your bowl edges and walls will be too hard to structurally support itself when you take it out of the mold. So you need something that's sort of a medium thickness, not a super, super little thickness to hold everything together and stay just basically as solid as you want it to be later on. So once you've rolled this coil out, you can start to strategize for your actual project. So these are the sort of tools that I have set aside for myself here. I have the wood rib. I like this metal rib for cutting the edges of the coils. I also have this wood modeling tool for smoothing things out, and also the triangular cutting part of your carving tool could be very useful also for sort of getting into little areas that you might need to shape. I always keep my needle tool handy just in case I feel like there's an area that needs to be sort of scratched and scored together. So it's important that you're keeping these coils very moist. You might want to spray them while they're sitting here. If things are getting very dry and they're starting to crack, it's a good idea to put your coils or your clay back into the bag and spray it overnight, just so that things are soft enough that when you are adding them together and blending them, the clay moves softly and smoothly so that it really adheres together. If things are too dry and the clay is not really moving when you're smoothing things out on the back, which is really just the inside of your bowl, then you're going to have a hard time keeping your bowl together. And we'll talk about sort of maintaining this in a second. So what I like to do when I am working with a bowl shape is really start in the center and work my way outwards. If you were to start up in the side here, it's going to be hard to keep the clay from slouching down. So it's easiest to really start here and work out. If you are doing something asymmetrical, I think that you should still plan to approach from the center and work your way outwards, even if it is asymmetrical, rather than still starting up on the side. So it's okay if you're not starting with, I would say, a circular shape in the middle, but still build around this middle area before you work your way upwards. So you want to have your sketch handy. I have mine just over here. And then I'm going to start to build some of these components for myself before I start to attach them together. So especially when you have something where all of these pieces are going to be somewhat similar in size, what you can actually do is sort of measure some pieces for yourself and then save them as a guide, sort of a ruler for your future pieces. I'm going to start the center of my bowl with a little swirl. Just something straightforward. So you'll notice my clay is definitely moist enough because as I am swirling this, I'm not getting any type of cracking. It's really bending very easily. That lets me know that this is soft enough to be worked with. So as I said before, I'm going to start in the center. So I'm going to place this in the middle. So that is going to sort of stay there for a second while I plan for my more symmetrical radial pieces. So since I want these all to be the same, and I've sort of, I planned ahead and sort of rolled out a few coils here so you can sort of see. So what I like to do is I like to use this metal rib to get a nice sharp edge on my pieces. So I would like for my pieces to be uniform. So what I'm going to do is actually cut myself a couple guiding pieces here, and then save one of them to be sort of my measuring ruler for future pieces, and then work with this one here. So this is a good strategy if you plan to do something that has many pieces that are the same and you want for them all to be identical. You also could just mark this out on your paper. For example, if I were to just lay this here and then draw a little mark right there, that would let me know that my coil pieces were this big, and that is just sort of a handy little tip in case you want to use that piece before you roll out any more coils. So I wanted to have sort of a double layer here with a ball in the center. So if I were to put this ball in here, right, this is too much open space between this coil and that coil. So I would like to put other coils in between. So knowing that this is going to be my outer piece, I am going to plan for a smaller inner piece like this. Since I'm having things sort of meet on a diagonal here, what I also am going to do is just use this to cut these diagonal pieces. That way this will match up really nicely. And I'm going to put my ball in the middle there, and that will fit pretty closely and tightly there. I might have a little bit of space, but that's okay. We'll fill that in later. So I'm going to do the same thing with this outside piece, like this. And then sort of pinch it because I want it to be a little bit more of a teardrop shape. Okay, so now that I've got this and I'm ready to put it into my mold, what I'm going to do is lay it in here. You can see that. And then I'm going to just gently press with my thumbs so that it is starting to follow the curvature of the actual bowl here. So since I have this curving shape, you don't want things to lay flat. You actually want it to follow the curvature. So I'm just gently pressing against it and making sure that I have contact space between these two, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and make another one of these. That is the same, and then I will show you how we're going to attach them together. So what you want to be thinking about, a couple of things. Do you want for a negative space like this to be open, or do you want it to be filled in? If you want it to be open here, you just need to make sure that it has enough support around the outside areas and that it's not sort of something large that is going to lead to basically instability in your piece at the end when you pull it out of this mold. So if you feel okay with that, that's fine. What I like to also do is take some clay that's a little bit soft, and I like to, even just like these little scraps here, I like to place them at the junctures of sort of larger areas that I've attached together. So I'm going to just smush those down like this. I personally want this space to be filled in. I feel like it's at the bottom of the bowl, so I want it to have enough stability. So I'm going to just put a sphere in there. It might be sort of trial and error to see what fits. Once you get something that fits, you can kind of just gently press. I also want for this other open area to be filled in, so I'm going to take some more clay. So since this is all going to be smoothed out on the inside of your bowl, it's okay if these sort of look a little patchwork right now, because we're all going to smooth this out in just 1 second, and you will see. Okay, so what you are going to do is make sure that every day, whatever you have built, you are going to smooth out on that same day. So rather than waiting between days when you have all of your pieces all in here to smooth out the whole interior, I think it's good to carefully start to smooth some of these elements out and attach them together right after you build them, because that is when the clay is the most moist. So I'm going to use this end of my wooden modeling tool and start to blend these pieces together. So you want to go against the different cracks that you have. So rather than going along sort of these lines, you want to go against them. You're going to work your way around all of your pieces each day. And then, for example, say this is all you got done today and you're planning to pack this up. What you want to do then is make sure that you give this a little bit of a spritz inside of this bowl before you place this entire thing into a plastic bag. So it's important that you are always wrapping this up every day. If you let this piece and these pieces get dry and then you go to build more and attach them together tomorrow, these will be too dry compared to your new clay that you're working with, and then they will not adhere and they will fall apart later, okay? Part of the reason why we are not scratching and scoring and using slip in this project is that we want our clay to be stiff but not so soft that it sort of melts and doesn't hold its shape. The other thing that we are doing is we are really adhering these coils together by smushing them. Finish this up. What you're going to do then is start to use, I personally like to use this metal rib. What I'm doing is sort of just holding it and pressing into the clay and working my way around and smoothing it out. You can also do this after each day. Okay, once you've got this, you can use your fingers to sort of smooth that out. But what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you what this looks like on the other side so you have an idea of where you're headed. So every day, right, you're going to just continue building up until you reach the edge of your mold. And then once you are ready, you will use the saran wrap or the newspaper to lift your project out of here. Right, this is already starting to build up that design and structure. That would be the inside part of my bowl, okay? Awesome, right? So make sure you're wrapping this up daily. Give it a little bit of a spritz, like a 1-2, if you are taking your time or taking a little bit of a break. Just make sure that these pieces really stay moist so that they adhere together, okay? And there you have it.